It is time to begin our morning Bible study. Good to see each one that's out this morning, and trust everyone has had a good week. Yesterday at Hartley Bridge, they had the area-wide singing, and I tell you what, North Macon was very well represented. That was very, very good turnout. Most of what's in here this morning was there yesterday, and a few others. We had a good turnout for North Macon. That was just great. Few announcements to be mindful of. There will be a gospel meeting, and Tish, you don't have this, a gospel meeting at Hillbridge Road in Dublin, March the 16th through 19th, with Milton Sampson. Milton preaches over in Jeffersonville, but Milton's going to be the speaker of that meeting. It's coming up March the 16th through 19th, so 2 or 3 weeks away yet. Ladies' Day at Hartley Bridge on the 15th of March. Widowhood luncheon tomorrow at noon at Warner Robins. Ladies' Day at Hartley Bridge on the 15th. Isaiah's wedding on the 8th. And in March, or April the 13th through 16th, gospel meeting over Hartley Bridge with Victory SQ. We do have a card here from Gray. As most of you know, we have been supporting Gray in a small way for the last several years now, really. And it says, you all have supported us at the Gray Church of Christ for so long. We appreciate all that you have done throughout the years and all that you continue to do for the Lord's church. Please continue to pray for us in the Gray Church of Christ. And it's got several signatures on it, so that's nice to get acknowledgement from them. Linda's got a birthday this week, the 28th. So happy birthday to her toward the end of this week. And sick list. Well, it's not listed here, but happy birthday to your granddaughter that day. She'll be 6 or 7, a year old. 1 year old. How time flies. So, happy birthday to her as well. Good to see Peggy back with us this morning. How you doing? All right. Sick list, we got Everett Picklesheimer. He's over in Forsyth. Continue to remember him. Brenda Riggins. Jimmy heard from her last night. She wanted to let the ladies know that she got the card that y'all sent, and she's appreciative of that. And continue to remember Ron Osmond, Mike Miles, Pam Israel, George, yeah. Good. That's good. Okay. Any other announcements needed as we get started? Now, Joe, would you lead us in a word of prayer at the start of class, please?
Let's all pray together. Holy Father, we thank you for this beautiful Sunday morning. We thank you for the many blessings that you give us on a daily basis. Our food, our clothing, our jobs, and all those many blessings that we enjoy. Father, we thank you that you watch over us every day, that you care about us, that you're concerned about what we do.
We are in the book of Job, looking at some of the trials that Job had endured. For the most part today, we're going to be looking primarily at Job 1 and 2. Not going to do verse by verse, but kind of a survey of these two chapters and break down the things that took place. What type of a person would you describe Job as being? Righteous, yes. Definitely so. Upright, yes. And these are good descriptions. He was righteous, he was upright. Certainly he was blameless before God. That's a big statement within itself. So he had a lot of great qualities about him. And probably the key verse of chapter 1 is verse 9. It said, "Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught?" And so that has been suggested to be the primary verse of chapter 1. And that verse kind of sets the stage for what's going to happen in this first couple chapters, as it talks about Job and the things that he endured. I'm pretty sure that probably everybody here is well aware of the sufferings of Job for the most part, the things that he endured, how devastating it must have been, and probably, I would say, one of the most difficult things that we go through is whenever we lose a loved one through their passing. And many of us have been there. We lose a loved one due to their passing. It's very, very difficult. It can be emotional. It can be stressful. A lot of things can happen here. But and I've never experienced this, and thankful for that, how difficult it must be when you lose a child. Can't comprehend that. It happens to people, as we all know. But can you imagine how heartbroken Job must have been when he lost all of his children?
Whole family.
Yeah. Out of his family, who did not pass? His wife. But he lost his family and his other possessions. So how devastating that must have been.
10 children.
10 children. I mean, can't imagine losing one, let alone all of them. Wow. That'd be hard to deal with. But anyway, Job did, and he endured it, as we well know. We know from verse 5 that Job was blameless. And, he was blameless, and he was one who was upright, as y'all had said, righteous before God. And the sufferings that he encountered, was it because of something he had done? No, it wasn't, was it? No. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't something he had done. And, it says that he was blameless and he'd been blessed by God. We see it from verse 5. He had many, many blessings. Was he a poor person, or was we consider him wealthy? He was wealthy. And that's part of Satan's approach. Look how well he has prospered. He's obeying you for his personal gain. Kind of that approach. Well, that wasn't the case at all. But that's the approach that Satan is using. And and we see in verse 6, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before God, and Satan came also among them. Now, what is meant here in verse 6 when it talks about the sons of God? Who would the sons of God be? Yeah. And Satan's there with them. And Satan's going to use this tactic. You know, he's here because you've blessed him. You know, but then in verse 7 it talks about, and the Lord said unto Satan, where comest thou? And he answered and said, from going to and fro in the earth and coming and from walking up and down it. And so, you know, then in verse 8 we get into where he talks about, how about my servant Job? Now, as we considered and as we mentioned, Job had not done anything to deserve what was about to happen. Why did it take place?
But God allowed it.
That's exactly right. God allowed it. Now, and that's the correct answer. Let's think about it for a second. God allowed it. And yeah, Peggy.
I also wanted to say that he also wanted to show Job Satan, let Satan know he had someone that he trusted that would continue to worship him regardless of what he said.
And that's exactly where we're getting ready to head. You're right on target with that. You know, God said, what about my servant Job? God knew Job. He knew his character. Do you think for a moment God doubted that what Job would do? Did God know what Job's response would be? Yeah, sure.
You know, you can relate this to another very faithful person who God said was his friend. He's the only one that's the friend of God. And something in Job might have been lacking, and he wanted to test it to see if it was there. Abraham, as much faith as he had, what did he do? He tested him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there was a reason for him testing him about killing Isaac. Had to have been a reason, and it proved something to God. It could be the same thing with Job. Job was a very righteous man, but yet he wanted to test him to see just how righteous he was.
Good point. Good point.
The Lord said, there's none on earth like Job.
Right.
He put him at the top.
Hey,
His
here,
first question.
as the old saying goes, here's the best I got. Yeah.
That's why I say when you're being chastened in this life, and it says that, of course, in James, you should be happy because it means God is watching you and he is trying to perfect you even more so, which is hard for us to think in those terms because it's painful, you know?
Yeah. James chapter 1, they're exactly right. Count it all joy. When we're going through difficult times, how many of us are thankful for that? How many of us count it joy?
Hard to be thankful.
It's hard, isn't it? It really is. It really is. And we've all been there to different degrees, and depending on our situation. But that's a very difficult. But it makes a bold statement too. And so, but when we think about Job, in verses 6 through 22, it deals with his first challenge. But let's notice verses 13 through 19, the attack that he makes. And there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house. And there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them. And the Sabaeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God is fallen from heaven and hath burned up the sheep, and the servants have consumed them, and I alone am escaped alone to tell thee. While he was yet speaking, there came another, and said, the Chaldeans made out 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away, yea, and slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was yet speaking, there came also another, saying, thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking in the eldest brother's house, and behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness, and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead, and I only am escaped to tell thee alone. Now, these few verses that we just read how long of a time span approximately is covered in this time span? You don't give us a specific number here, of course. The same day, that's exactly right. However, that hours may have been whatever, but it's the same day. Can you imagine that if you were an individual and you had the oxen and the donkeys and so forth, and these animals are valuable, and you're gathered with your family, and a messenger comes and tells you, hey, all of your cows are dead. All of your donkeys are dead. And the servant's taking care of them. That would ruin your day.
And it didn't just have a dozen.
Right.
He had thousands and thousands.
Thousands, yeah. And that alone will, look what just happened. But then again, it progresses from there. Then it goes on from there, as we saw the next couple of verses there, as it talked about that, it moves on and it talks about the sheep and the different animals, and then talks about the camels, all these different animals. It's livestock, if you will. All in one day, it's gone. Now, Deborah, you and Jake, y'all have how many sheep?
I think
18. Can't imagine that. Y'all have 18 of them things back there in your yard, or wherever you got them at. And I would suspect if something happened to all 18 of them at one time, it would probably upset Jake more than you. Jake would go crazy. It'd be like a fruitcake. But these are animals. Like I say, Job had many, many, many. And they all gone at one time. And then, of course, the house gives way. And those in the house are gone. So you lose to a large degree, you've lost your wealth, you've lost your fortune, now you lost your family. Wow. How do you deal with that? It was tough. Very, very difficult situation. But now notice Job's response in verses 20 to 22. And Job arose and went to rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground and worshipped. And said, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all of this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Those last 3 verses or so makes a huge, huge statement about Job and his faith in God. He says he was grieving, he was upset, See, he rent his mantle, he shaved his head, and he fell down and worshiped. What an attitude. Suffering and hurting, grieving the way he was. He did not blame God. He worshiped God. How would we have reacted if it were us? And I don't know that answer. That's a bold situation that has taken place here. It said, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Now, certainly not in the case here with Job. The Lord had blessed him, and he says the Lord takes away, and he's correcting what he's saying. But as we relate it to us, certainly the Lord blesses us in different degrees depending on who we are and whatever our circumstances may be. But many times, a lot of the things that we are blessed with, we may end up losing. Now, when that happens, not all the time now, but sometimes when that happens, why does it happen?
Sometimes we get more focused on him.
Yeah.
If you turn back to him, or easy, because God already knows us. When he do stuff like that, he do stuff that, when you go fall like that, God do it for your strength,
Mm-hmm.
to better you, and to make you get closer to him, or respect him. That's why I say, you have to respect him every day.
James 1, count it joy. But how many times have we suffered things, whatever they may be? And again, this is not always 100% true. I'm not saying it is. But many times, the things that we suffer from or that we endure is a result of bad choices that we make.
That's right.
That's not always true now. There's some things that are beyond our control. But how many of our struggles have we brought upon ourselves? Now, that's certainly not the case with Job here. But no, I'm making that application to us. Do we not bring some of our own problems on ourselves? Many times we do. But not always. Not always.
I would think that was all the testing Job would need. That's the way I'd be looking at it. I'd be praying, I know that everything is yours and taking this away from me, but I still, bless. I still feel my connection with you and everything, and you're my God.
Mhm.
And you would think, as a human being, that would be enough test, but it kept going.
It kept going on and on.
I mean, I hope I never get in his position.
Now, you bring up a good point. You say that kept on, and that's correct. But we see the response that he has given to this first challenge here. Why do you suppose this pressure keeps going on and on?
Because he's failed. In the first part, he was trying to get Job to curse God,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't happen. So he's going to keep on going.
Jimmy said, because he failed in the first part.
Who failed?
He,
Satan.
Satan, that's exactly right. Job didn't fail. Okay, he lost whatever he had, but he remained faithful to God.
Right.
Satan failed in this attempt. God allowed Satan to be tested. And Satan is really throwing it at him right here. Boy, here you go. And he failed. That's exactly right. He failed.
And the Bible says, that's why we should hate other people, because the battles are between principalities that we aren't even aware of. There's a battle ongoing spiritually. We have a little bit of indication of what it is, but this is definitely an example of a battle going on between two right there. And Job was caught in the middle.
That's exactly right.
I think also, as you were a young Christian, I don't think,
And that's a very valid point. And probably each and every one of us can say that very thing. If we could go back 50 years, would we do things different? We say we would, and I would hope to think that I would do some things different. But now that I'm 50 years beyond what I just said, however long that was, now that I'm 50 years beyond that, do I still do some silly things that are not wise?
We have a family.
What do you say, Jimmy?
What's it just?
Not as often. But think about it. And Anthony's right. We're older. We've got different responsibilities. We see things differently. But now, in the last 5 years, have I made some choices that I would not make again? Probably I would say yes to that. I would
A
say
lot
yes.
more wiser,
True.
you know, I would still be more molded as a Christian.
Mhm.
Now, so my mindset, my thinking is different.
Yeah, exactly. The older we get, our priorities change, our thought process changes, and it should. You know,
You know, I think that a lot of our bad mistakes that we make is based on a sin. If God wills, we think when we're younger, we know that our life could end, but we think it's probably very little chance that it's going to. We think that we've got more days, and we make a lot of decisions based on we've got more days, we've got more years, we've got decades, we've got 2 or 3 decades down the road. When you finally get to the age and you realize the time's running out, you don't have much left. One way or the other, you're leaving.
yeah,
You know, and I think that makes a difference how you think. When
Absolutely.
You realize that you're leaving, you're not staying there very long, so you better start making decisions that will, get you to eternity where you want to be.
how many of us view life differently now than we did 2 or 3 years ago? Yeah, absolutely. The older we get, the more we realize how few our days left on this earth are. And certainly, as we get to that point, we certainly need to be thinking about eternity. Are we prepared? Are we ready? You know, the things that we thought about when we were 20 years old, many of those things are not important anymore. How many of us at an older age, if we have life insurance or health insurance, how many of us at an older age would just, I don't think I need that anymore, we'd give it up? How important is life insurance to us when you're 70 years old? Pretty significant. How important was life insurance to you when you were 20 years old? I got plenty of time. What you talking about? Man, I got another 50 years. But we don't know that. So as we get older, our priorities do change. And in reality, they probably should. You know, we become more mature, more mindful of the fact that we do have limited time. We think more about eternity, the reality of the consequence of the choices that we make. You know, a lot to think about, a lot to consider. What could be more important to us, any of us, than to know the certainty of our eternal destination? Can't think of anything.
And I guess that would be our first priority.
Right.
But the second priority is to think about the church and where it is,
True.
and how can I help preserve the church.
Very, very good. You know,
That's a priority.
And not only preserve the church, grow the church.
Absolutely. And in America, the church has, as we all know, is not as appealing as it should be to many of our citizens. We have been fed by various means the ways of Satan, the ways of the world. And people are gullible. People are following that path. Look at the many, many congregations of the Lord's church that has very few young people. When you have gospel meetings in the area, regardless of where it may be held, how many young people are there? Yesterday at Hartley Bridge, area-wide singing, how many young people were there?
Like 3 or 4.
That's about it, yeah. Yeah. And so,
That's alarming.
it is. It's alarming. That's very right. It's exactly right. But yet you go to some of your foreign countries, the buildings are packed, young and old alike.
If they have a building.
If they even have a building, yeah. Many times they don't. So, we think of the growth of the church. Certainly we need to be concerned about America, our own areas, but around the world as well. Souls are souls. Whether they be here, whether they be somewhere else. And I'm not saying we shouldn't focus here, because we should. But look where the fields are right. Don't just isolate ourselves to one specific area. But then we get into chapter 2 somewhat, and we're going to see the second challenge that he's going to be facing. Beginning at chapter 2, we won't read all of these verses down to the first 10 here. It says, again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord asked him, where did you come? He's going to and fro in the earth and so forth. And then he said, you considered my servant Job. There is none like him in the earth. A perfect and upright man, one that fears God, and escheweth evil, and still holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Now, we look at verse 3. The Lord is saying, Satan, that last sentence of that verse, although you move me against him. Satan, this verse is telling us that Satan moved God against Job. And what is meant by that statement?
God is still alive.
There's your answer. God allowed it. God could have prevented it, but he allowed it. And we talked about earlier why. So God allowed it. And so he goes on from there. Then he gets down to verse 7 through 9. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself with, and he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, do you still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. Wow. Couple of staggering events. His body is covered in these boils. I asked a question the other day. How many of us has had a boil? Probably several. I know I had one time. And it was painful. It was one. Can you imagine
Covered.
being covered? The pain, the suffering, the agony that he must have been going through, on top of what he's already lost. I mean, as Jimmy said a while ago, it just keeps growing, going on and on. So he's suffering greatly. And now you got this physical suffering from the pain. What are some of the most devastating pains, physical pains, that you might endure? Fire. Burn. Anthony was burned here a while back when that accident.
You get to third degree, then you don't feel anything.
I mean,
And it can't really give you nothing, because your body really has a hit itself.
yeah.
So you can't really, it's crazy, but it's where it is.
It really is. Years ago, there was a young man up in North Carolina. He had gone out with his kids one morning, and they were somewhere out in a field or whatever. And as I remember the details now, or a building, wherever they might have been, I don't know how there was a little fire. I don't know if the kids set the fire plate. I don't remember how that little fire started. It was a small fire. And this individual seen a bucket of water to pour on that fire. Going to put the fire out. He picked it up and threw it on it. It wasn't water. It was gas. And he had severe burns. Now he survived. And but oh, that was painful. Have you ever burnt yourself on the stove? Getting a pot out or something? Yeah. Don't it hurt? I remember one time Crystal was a little girl, the stove was on, the burner had just been turned on, and she was told, don't touch the stove. What did she do? Popped that hand right up there when she moved it in a hurry. You know. But a little burn's painful. Consider the burns that Anthony went through, how painful that was. That was painful. Now consider the boils that Job is experiencing. His whole body is aching and suffering. That's pain.
I can't
That-
imagine taking pottery,
Ooh.
and scraping
I can't imagine it. Absolutely. And God allowed this. And we recognize that. But then in verse 10, we see Job's response. And his wife didn't curse God. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. It's a huge statement. And then verses 11 through 13, he begins to encounter his discussions with his three friends. So-called. You know, a lot of people you have to be aware of or weary of. Many times, it could be your family. Many times, it might be your friends. You know, sometimes well-intended people will give you bad advice. That his wife, whenever she tells him, you know, you just need to curse God and die, do you think she meant harm, or do you think she meant it for his well-being?
Well, I think that's a loaded question, because even though it talks about Job here, his wife suffered the same loss.
True. Good point.
And so, she was going through a lot too.
Absolutely.
So our response is, God, why have you done this to me? And you keep doing it to me.
And Anthony gives a very good response here. We talk about Job and what he's gone through. And oftentimes we point to his wife, her response in a negative way. But as Anthony said, he's exactly right. She's going through this too.
Yeah, same thing.
Very good response here. She's encountering this as well. This perhaps shows a difference in her faith and his faith. Different levels. But she's suffering too. So that's a good answer. Okay. That's a survey, and it talks about some of the troubles of Job that we've encountered here in the first couple chapters. The next week we will begin to look at chapter 3, and as he deals with, and 3 and 4 as he deals with his friends and their response and his reactions. Good discussion as always.